exploited in rural America, a dam's control system compromised, and suddenly the floodgates of national security swing wide open. This isn't science fiction, this is the cyber battlefield where America's infrastructure became ground zero for one of the most audacious digital attacks in modern history. Drop your thoughts in the comments below about how vulnerable you think our infrastructure really is, and hit that subscribe button because what comes next will change how you see cybersecurity forever. The attack on the Bowman Avenue Dam in Rye Brook, New York seemed almost inconsequential at first glance. A small dam, barely 20 feet high, controlling a modest reservoir in suburban Westchester County. But what Chinese hackers accomplished that day in 2013 sent shockwaves through the Pentagon, the Department of Homeland Security, and intelligence agencies across the Western world. The breach wasn't about destroying a dam or flooding a neighborhood. It was a reconnaissance mission, a digital reconnaissance that mapped vulnerabilities in American critical infrastructure with surgical precision. The hackers, identified later as members of China's cyber espionage units, didn't just break into the dam's systems. They explored every digital corner, every control mechanism, every piece of software that governed the dam's operations. They tested response times, studied security protocols, and downloaded operational data that could be weaponized in future conflicts. The breach lasted weeks before being detected, and during that time, these digital infiltrators had unprecedented access to industrial control systems that mirror those protecting thousands of critical facilities across America. What makes this attack particularly chilling is its sophistication and patience. Chinese cyber operatives didn't crash systems or trigger alarms. They moved through the dam's network like ghosts, leaving minimal traces while extracting maximum intelligence. Security researchers who later analyzed the intrusion discovered that the attackers used custom-built malware specifically designed to communicate with supervisory control and data acquisition systems, the SCADA networks that form the nervous system of modern infrastructure. These aren't the tools of amateur hackers or criminal syndicates. These are nation-state weapons, developed over years by military cyber units with virtually unlimited resources and strategic objectives that extend far beyond simple espionage. The Federal Bureau of Investigation eventually traced the attack back to servers in China, specifically to networks associated with the People's Liberation Army. But attribution in cyberspace is never simple. The attackers routed their intrusions through multiple compromised computers across several countries, creating a digital maze that took investigators months to unravel. By the time American authorities fully understood the scope of the breach, the hackers had already moved on to other targets, applying lessons learned from the dam intrusion to attacks on electrical grids, water treatment facilities, and transportation networks. The Pentagon's response evolved in stages, each more aggressive than the last. Initially, defense officials treated the dam breach as an isolated incident, one data point in the ongoing cyber conflict between Washington and Beijing. But as intelligence analysts dug deeper, they discovered a pattern. The Bowman Avenue Dam wasn't an outlier. It was part of a systematic Chinese campaign to map American infrastructure vulnerabilities, creating detailed blueprints that could be exploited during a military crisis or geopolitical confrontation. This revelation triggered a fundamental shift in how America's military establishment approached cyber defense. Within months of identifying the Chinese intrusion, the Pentagon launched Operation Silk Road, a classified counter-cyber initiative designed to harden critical infrastructure and develop offensive capabilities that could deter future attacks. The operation brought together the National Security Agency, Cyber Command, the Department of Energy, and private sector partners in an unprecedented collaboration. Their mission was twofold: plug the security holes that Chinese hackers had exploited, and develop capabilities to strike back at Chinese infrastructure if deterrence failed. The gloves were coming off, and the cyber battlefield was about to get significantly more dangerous. Defense officials began sharing threat intelligence with infrastructure operators across the country, warning them about Chinese tactics, techniques, and procedures observed during the dam attack. These briefings revealed alarming truths about the state of American industrial security. Many facilities protecting critical infrastructure were running outdated software, using default passwords, and lacking basic network segmentation that could contain a breach. It was a security nightmare, and Chinese hackers had documented every weakness. The race was on to upgrade defenses before those vulnerabilities could be weaponized in a real conflict. The Pentagon also authorized offensive cyber operations targeting Chinese networks. While details remain classified, Cybersecurity experts and former intelligence officials have confirmed that American hackers penetrated Chinese infrastructure in retaliatory strikes, demonstrating that Beijing's critical systems were just as vulnerable as America's. These operations served dual purposes, gathering intelligence on Chinese capabilities while sending an unmistakable message that cyber attacks on American infrastructure would trigger proportional responses. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction, which had prevented nuclear war during the Cold War, was being adapted for the digital age, but escalation in cyberspace carries unique risks. Unlike conventional military operations, cyber attacks can spiral out of control quickly. Malware can spread beyond intended targets, hitting civilian infrastructure and causing unintended casualties. The lack of clear international norms governing cyber warfare means that each attack exists in a legal and ethical gray zone, where rules of engagement are improvised and consequences are unpredictable. The Pentagon found itself navigating uncharted waters, developing strategies for a type of conflict that defied traditional military doctrine. Congressional hearings following the dam breach exposed deep divisions about how America should respond to Chinese cyber aggression. Hawks argued for massive retaliation, including economic sanctions, indictments of Chinese military officers, and public attribution designed to shame Beijing on the world stage. Doves warned that escalation could trigger a cyber war, with catastrophic consequences for both nations. The debate played out in classified briefings and public testimony, with intelligence officials presenting evidence of Chinese capabilities that made even the most hawkish senators reconsider their positions. The broader implications of the dam attack extend far beyond bilateral tensions between Washington and Beijing. The breach demonstrated that no facility is too small or too insignificant to be targeted in modern cyber warfare. If Chinese hackers would spend weeks infiltrating a suburban dam's control systems, then every water treatment plant, electrical substation, and pipeline control room in America was potentially at risk. This realization forced a complete rethinking of infrastructure security, transforming it from an afterthought into a national security priority that demanded billions in investment and fundamental changes to how critical facilities operate. Private companies operating infrastructure faced new regulatory requirements and security standards in the wake of the attack. The Department of Homeland Security issued directives mandating security audits, network monitoring, and incident reporting for thousands of facilities. Compliance proved expensive and technically challenging, particularly for smaller operators who lacked cybersecurity expertise and resources. But the alternative, leaving America's infrastructure vulnerable to foreign adversaries, was unacceptable. The costs of prevention, however high, paled in comparison to the potential devastation of a successful attack during wartime. The technological dimension of this conflict continues to evolve at breakneck speed. Chinese cyber operations have grown more sophisticated since the dam breach, incorporating artificial intelligence, machine learning, and quantum computing research into their offensive capabilities. American defenders struggle to keep pace, hampered by bureaucratic inertia, talent shortages, and the inherent advantage that attackers enjoy in cyberspace. Every new connected device, every smart sensor added to infrastructure networks, creates potential entry points for adversaries. The attack surface keeps expanding, and with it, the challenge of maintaining adequate defenses. Intelligence assessments suggest that Chinese hackers now have persistent access to portions of American infrastructure, maintaining covert footholds that could be activated during a crisis. These sleeper agents in the form of malware remain dormant, avoiding detection while awaiting orders to disrupt operations. The prospect of Chinese operatives having a kill switch for American electrical grids or water systems represents a nightmare scenario that keeps defense planners awake at night. Deterrence in this environment requires convincing Beijing that any use of these capabilities would trigger devastating consequences, a calculus that depends on credible offensive capabilities and ironclad defenses. The human dimension of this conflict often gets overlooked amid discussions of technical vulnerabilities and military responses. Behind every compromised system are engineers, operators, and security professionals working long hours to protect infrastructure that millions of Americans depend on daily. These frontline defenders face sophisticated adversaries with nation-state resources, yet many work for local utilities or private companies with limited budgets and support. The dam breach highlighted their critical role and the urgent need to invest in training, tools, and talent that can match Chinese capabilities. International cooperation has become essential to countering Chinese cyber operations. The dam attack prompted America to share intelligence with allies, coordinate defensive measures, and develop joint attribution capabilities that make it harder for Beijing to hide its tracks. NATO has designated cyber attacks on critical infrastructure as potential triggers for collective defense provisions, raising the stakes for any nation contemplating such operations. These multilateral efforts create diplomatic and military costs for Chinese aggression, though whether they provide sufficient deterrence remains an open question. The long-term strategic competition between America and China will increasingly play out in cyberspace, with infrastructure as a primary battlefield. The dam breach was an early skirmish in what promises to be a decades-long conflict over who controls the digital domain and what rules govern its use. American responses must balance offensive capabilities with defensive investments, deterrence with diplomacy, and security with the openness that has made the internet a transformative force. Finding that balance while protecting critical infrastructure from sophisticated adversaries represents one of the defining challenges of the 21st century. As we close this deep dive into one of the most significant cyber breaches in American history, the question isn't whether another attack will happen, but when. The vulnerabilities exposed by Chinese hackers at the small dam in New York persist across thousands of facilities nationwide. The Pentagon's response, aggressive and multifaceted, may have raised the costs of Chinese cyber operations, but it hasn't eliminated the threat. Every day, invisible battles rage across networks protecting our water, our power, our communications, and every day the defenders work to stay one step ahead of adversaries who never sleep, never stop innovating, and never forget that in cyberspace, the next Pearl Harbor could be just one keystroke away. Tentor novamente,